Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Asil Ibrahim, Head of Practice of Corporate and Commercial Hiring at Frazer Jones, and I'm delighted to be joined by Emma O'Connor, Partner and Head of Client Training at workplace specialist law firm Doyle Clayton. Emma is one of the UK's leading employment lawyers and has been helping organisations navigate the practical implications of employment legislation changes and our famous Employment Rights Act. Over the past few months, Emma and I have been running a series of events focused on the ERA and helping HR leaders understand what these changes mean in practice. One thing we've heard consistently is that while organizations know change is coming, many are still working out how best to prepare. So today's session is all about helping you get ahead of that curve. The changes we're discussing will undoubtedly have legal implications, which Emma will take us through with her expert hand, but also have significant implications for recruitment, performance management, leadership capability, and broader people strategy. One of the problems here is that organizations often ask, who should we hire, before they've asked, what is the problem we're trying to solve? The clients we're speaking to aren't just asking, how do we manage dismissal differently? They're increasingly asking, how do we make better hiring decisions? How do we identify risks earlier? And how do we equip managers to have better conversations? And most importantly, how do we give people the best possible chance to succeed? Ultimately, many of the risks associated with unfair dismissal don't start at the point of exit. They start much earlier in the employee life cycle, from workforce planning, recruitment, through to onboarding and performance management. And the cost of a hiring mistake is about to get a lot more expensive. So, a quick piece of housekeeping before we begin. We don't share the slides after the session, but we will circulate a recording link to everyone who's registered. If you have any follow-up questions and would like any specific advice relating to your organization, or if you simply want to continue the conversation, both Emma and I's details will be shared at the end of the webinar. With that, I'll hand over to Emma to take us through the legal context and what HR leaders need to be thinking about as we move towards implementation.
Thank you very much, Azil, and good afternoon, everyone. Yep, so we'll be giving you a high-level overview today in the 45 minutes or so that we're with you. And thank you, Azil, for that wonderful introduction. I'm sure most of you who are on the webinar or watching us on demand have probably been to, goodness me, you've probably lost count of the amount of webinars and updates and articles and things that you've read. And I'm hearing lots from my HR clients, which is just, Emma, please make it stop. Because I do think we've got complete and utter information overload at the moment. But what I do want to do is I want to cut through some of that today and really focus on this core issue of how can we manage unfair dismissal, because we know it's going to get more complicated. But just to put the unfair dismissal part of the Employment Rights Act into perspective, I think it's worth just having a little step back and really reflecting on the other areas that we need to be thinking about and focusing on. Now, as we know, the Employment Rights Act is coming in over 25. Some changes happened at the end of 25. Obviously, this year, April, and soon to be October. And then 2027 is another big year. But obviously, we need to be thinking about changes that are coming through, the changes that we saw in April. So we saw some changes in April with regards to family leave. So certain family leave entitlements became day one right. And we saw the change, didn't we, to statutory sick pay, which became payable from the first day of sickness absence. We've also got some changes that are coming in primarily next year, although do watch the trade union the trade union piece, because that is happening, the changes are happening 25 April, October. Rights of access, something there to really focus on, are things that our clients who've never really had any interaction with trade unions before are actually thinking, are we going to get, a letter, a knock at the door saying we want to come and have access to your staff? So again, something to watch there. Contracts, it's going to get harder from 2027 for employers to make changes, those core changes to their terms and conditions. So what is being referred to as restricted variations. So again, some work to be done there. And obviously, again, next year, workforce planning, thinking about not just how we use maybe agency staff, zero or low hours workers, but also around those big redundancy programs as well. So we're going to see some changes in terms of the trigger. So when a business and when that redundancy, that potential redundancy is going to be caught by the collective consultation obligations. It's probably something that I'm talking about a lot, running lots and lots of awareness sessions, training sessions for boards, executive committees, employees, and also managers. The preventative duty when it comes to sexual harassment, that compliance bar is being raised from October, from currently reasonable steps to all reasonable steps. And please do not underestimate just how those three little letters are going to make a huge difference to the potential risk and liability there for an employer if they do get to tribunal, and obviously if they lose that sexual harassment case. So again, some real changes there. And also new liability for third-party harassment, again, which includes all forms of harassment, harassment related to a protected characteristic, as well as sexual harassment. And again, has the employer taken those preventative steps, those all reasonable steps to prevent third-party harassment in the workplace? So lots of work to be done there, lots of support that we're giving employers. And really, this question, if you've got an employment tribunal claim, now or tomorrow, would you have the evidence to be able to show that, yep, we have taken reasonable steps, and then soon to be all reasonable steps? So again, if you want to find out more about that, then please do get in touch. And also for those of you who are regulated, so you are in the financial services sector, again, the FCA, we've got new non-financial misconduct rules that are coming out from the 1st of September. So again, lots of work to be done around conduct, engagement, culture, as well as obviously the legal compliance bit, risk assessments, policies, processing, reporting lines, training. I could go on and on. And then obviously greater scrutiny as well next year in terms of flexible working. So not just focusing on the reason for the rejection, but again, really focusing on the reasonableness of that and looking as well at the process more generally. And we're also going to see some protections as well, particularly at the moment, we think just for women who are pregnant, maternity leave, and for a period thereafter. But again, that may be extended as well. So that is just a snapshot. There are other changes that we've seen as well that have happened, but really those are the key focus points for employers. As I've said, it doesn't happen all the time. It's not going to happen all in one go, which is a blessing, but it does constantly feel that we're sort of, right, what am I doing now? What am I doing now? So again, October, some changes there, particularly the sexual harassment and the third-party harassment. Also, another point to note as well, that the length of time somebody will have to bring an employment tribunal claim, currently at 3 months, is going to be extended to 6 months from the 1st of October. So again, that's also going to have a big impact. So other rule changes, again, we saw the Fair Work Agency come into being on the 6th of April of this year, looking at, sort of in terms of compliance, holiday, national minimum wage. Again, I can see that remit growing and growing, holiday pay and holiday record keeping as well. So again, that's something we need to think about. We're going to see changes with regards to NDAs around, thinking about binding out claims for whistleblowing around sexual harassment, etc. And again, those larger organisations, 250 or more employees, equality action planning, menopause plans, and maybe as well we may see disability and ethnicity pay gap reporting as well. So there is lots to be done and lots going on. But I think that we do have a period of time where we need to start really focusing on and thinking about these changes to unfair dismissal. Now, as we know, when we think about employment rights, we can sort of pigeonhole them into contractual rights. So what does your contract say? Notice, pay, etc. So what does the contract say? We have to get the contract right. Then we have to think about acting fairly and reasonably. Of course, we do those implied rights and obviously making sure that we don't fall foul of the Equality Act as well. Then we have to think about statutory rights. What rights do employees have in law? Holiday pay, making sure that we don't unlawfully deduct money from their wages, for example. And when we think about how we end an employee's employment with us, we obviously need to think about the statutory right not to be unfairly dismissed, which effectively means that if an employer wants to justify that dismissal, they have to have a fair reason, which is set out in the Employment Rights Act of 1996, and they have to follow a fair process. And again, the type of process that will need to be followed will depend on the type of dismissal. So conduct dismissals, capability dismissals, qualification dismissals, or individual redundancies, those small redundancies as well. But obviously, individual consultation will also apply when we've got those larger redundancies as well. So collective and individual running in parallel. And why I really like that picture is because I've been describing, the current position with regards to unfair dismissal as a bit like having a comfort blanket. So at the moment, as we currently stand, the statutory right to bring a claim for ordinary unfair dismissal, employees, it's an employment right, they currently need 2 years service. Few little wrinkles around, notice and 2 years, but essentially 2 years service. And the employer needs to show, if they're challenged in an employment tribunal, that they had that potential fair statutory reason, capability, conduct qualification, redundancy, breach of a statutory enactment, and some other substantial reason justifying dismissal. So they've got to show that it falls within one of those 5. They also have to follow a fair process. And again, as I've said, thinking about the ACAS code as well, with regards to conduct. And again, the type of process that you're going to be following will depend on the type of dismissal. So if it's a conduct dismissal, you'll have some investigation, you'll have a meeting to discuss, the employee will be entitled to be accompanied, there'll be a decision, and the employee should be given the right of appeal. And that's really kind of a rough overview in terms of process. It can obviously get more complicated depending on the circumstances, but always go back to basics. What are we thinking about here? What are the allegations? Making sure that we're open, fair, transparent in the way that we are conducting that investigation, and then obviously making sure that we follow through with that process as well, making sure that we give the employee the right to be able to state their case and see the evidence against them. And again, we must act reasonably as well in all the circumstances. And again, that also focuses on who you are as an employer, your size, and the administrative resources that you have at your disposal. Yes, there are automatic unfair reasons. So, for example, if you dismiss a woman because she is pregnant, then again, she doesn't need that qualifying period of service. It's an automatic right. And the other one to raise there would be whistleblowing. If you dismiss an employee because they have blown the whistle, then again, they don't need that 2 years of qualifying service. We currently, again, leaving aside any automatic unfair dismissal claims there, but for an ordinary unfair dismissal claim, we also have a cap on compensation. And that cap, as we know, goes up every April, but alas, weeping, this April was the last time that cap was increased. So currently that cap on compensation is around about £123,000 or 52 weeks pay, whichever is the lower amount. And obviously that's kind of nice and it's neat and it's good for lawyers because we can help you and help our clients to predict as best we can do what level of compensation that is. Now, employees can't sit back, show me the money. They have to mitigate their loss. We're compensating people, putting them in the position they would have been in had their employment not ended. But again, we've got that compensation cap. So that's how we currently stand with our lovely little bunny in a bed with a blanket, with our little comfort blankets. Now, fast forward 1st of January, and that comfort blanket is going to be rudely ripped away from us when we see that the qualifying period of service for unfair dismissal is actually going to be reduced from 2 years to 6 months. And, which we didn't know before December of last year, because it was never in any manifesto or in any of the plans really with regards to the changes that the Labour government wanted to make to unfair dismissal. Again, the removal of the compensation cap And for many of you, that removal of that cap is actually going to be incredibly important for the way that you think about how you manage dismissals and also your appetite for risk. Because what that is essentially going to mean that lots of employees, unfair dismissal, you know, wasn't really worth it because they earn much more than £123,000 if that's all that they're able to claim. But for some employees who perhaps earn, a lot of money, they have bonuses and share incentives and other types of, extra payments. If that cap is being removed and potentially they can claim more compensation, than obviously than they could have done under the current system. Again, it's going to make unfair dismissal a more attractive claim. It's going to make claims potentially harder to predict and maybe harder to settle as well. But it's not just employees who earn more money that potentially have the benefit of removing of that cap. There might be ongoing losses. Maybe somebody does find another job, but then there's a gap, there's a disparity in terms of what they were earning with you and what they're currently earning with their new employer. Also, employees may be out of work for longer. Maybe they have a health condition, which means they're not able to sort of, start one job, finish one job and start another. So yes, we're going to have to think more carefully about who works for us. We're going to have to be more on it in terms of thinking about their contract of employment. Again, how long has somebody worked for you? It's going to be a question that I ask all of my clients now, but it's going to be a question that I'm going to be asking for even more detail on when it comes to the 1st of January 2027. Those of you who came to our event last year when we were talking about the Employment Rights Bill as it once was, goodness me, that seems like a complete lifetime ago now, doesn't it? But we were talking about the Employment Rights Bill because obviously at that point, the proposal was to bring in unfair dismissal from the first day of employment. And it was only when we went through this sort of wondrous period of parliamentary ping pong, who knew that that was a thing, that we then had the House of Lords saying, are you really sure you want to do this, government? And in the end, the government settled on a 6-month period. But as you can see, it means that we're sort of, kind of following some of our European neighbours as well. So that's where we sit. We've gone from that 2 years, and obviously we will go to 6 months for those ordinary unfair dismissal claims. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, we're talking about it obviously because it's important. But another really key point to note is that, look, I've been an employment lawyer for a long time, and I've seen, qualifying periods of unfair dismissal at 12 months and 18 months, 2 years. It's bobbed around, and you can tell by, the colour of the government what the length of service is. But how previous governments have operated is that they've changed that qualifying period by secondary legislation. So another government can come in and they can make it what they want, and they can do that very, very easily. What's happening under the Employment Rights Act is there's changes being made by primary legislation. So effectively that means, for now at least, it is a permanent change. So we have to get used to it, and we have to make sure, as both HR professionals and more importantly our managers, that we start to get our ducks in a row, and we really focus not just on what this means in terms of practical stuff, but also what this means in terms of risk. So what's the impact? As Azil has rightly said, it's going to have a huge impact on recruitment. If we're not going to have that sort of, 2-year window, that 2-year comfort blanket, again, it's going to mean there is greater focus and greater emphasis on recruitment. It's also going to have a real issue, isn't it, in terms of those early few months of employment. And I'm doing lots of work and running lots of sessions with clients around how can we manage onboarding and probation? How can we make that process more effective? Do we need to think about shortening the process? Probably yes, depending obviously on your current length of probation, because, obviously we have to think about that. If an employee, as at the 1st of January, if they've got 6 or more months service, as at the 1st of January 2027, then again, they can challenge their dismissal. So again, we have to think really clearly and carefully about probation and making it more effective. Obviously, it's going to then affect the other ways in which we may end an employee's employment conduct. Yeah, we're going to have to start thinking more around, have we got the process right? Remembering fair reason and fair process. So again, really focusing on processes. And again, linked to probation as well is managing performance. Look, we know nobody likes managing performance. It always sits in the too difficult pile. But actually, because the stakes are so much higher, it is something where we are going to need managers to have those tricky conversations and actually do engage with the performance management process, and not maybe twice or, once a year. So again, we really need to think about how effective is our performance management process around, kind of spotting issues and spotting them early. So we've got time to manage those without, rushing around and thinking, oh my goodness, we're in unfair dismissal territory. Redundancies as well, of course, that's going to have an impact, isn't it? If that service qualification period has been reduced. I'm going to talk a little bit more about ending a fixed term contract because certainly the clients that I'm working with, it's a bit like, oh my goodness, shock, horror, panic. So I will talk a little bit about ending a fixed term contract and again, generally managing exits as well. Thinking about how we manage and how we support, and how we are making really good and clear decisions, round about, how we manage exits. And again, really, really thinking about those processes, thinking about the ACAS code, and again, making sure we make those clear, transparent, and open decisions as employers, and particularly as managers as well. So, as I said, that removal of the compensation cap, it's still the same. An employee has to, mitigate their losses. Will mitigate their losses. And again, it's going to be harder to, potentially more difficult to settle because, if an employee thinks they might get lots and lots of money and maybe the employer thinks that they may not, sometimes it's quite difficult to persuade an individual. And also, I think that length of time for people to be able to bring claims, 3 to 6 months, again, I think that's going to have maybe more of an issue because, if it's going to take somebody longer to find another job, again, they're going to have a greater window, if we like, to be able to challenge their original dismissal decision. We are incredibly busy as a team. I've never known this many cases that are coming through, and that can be for all sorts of reasons. I think AI is again having a big impact in terms of the way in which litigation is being conducted, particularly with claimants. We're seeing much longer complaints, longer grievances, longer employment tribunal cases, witness evidence, etc. And I'm sure some of you on the call will have also noticed a real kind of shift in terms of the amount and types of claims and complaints and the speed at which an individual is able to challenge the decision that the manager or the business has made. So again, more litigation, more complex litigation as well, not just the unfair dismissal claim, but maybe, whistleblowing, discrimination thrown in there as well. And for the bottom line, as I've said, for many employees out there, unfair dismissal is now going to be a pretty viable claim for them. And I do think it's going to make, settlement agreements more difficult. And, we've had a question about, post-termination negotiations. I do think so, because, and also we're also seeing as well, and again, linked to, discussions around redundancy. We've seen as well, particularly with the collective redundancy, we saw in April the protective award claim increased to 180 days pay as well. So again, lots of pressure on employers, firstly, to get it right. But again, if you're going into those negotiations, you've maybe you're at point A in your negotiation strategy, but somebody is kind of, way, way down the track with what they think they might be able to get. And again, AI law is not necessarily good law. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's going to have to be a bit of a reality check, I think, in terms of, leadership teams, boards. I think, and I'm working a lot with boards, just telling them, going in, spending an hour and just telling them, this is what is changing. These are where I see the key risk areas for your organization. And these are things actually that you need to think about from a strategic perspective in terms of actually, what does this mean for our business? Yes, we've got some time, but as we know, we're now at, where are we now? July. I mean, goodness me. So, we have to really think about, yes, we have time, but actually we need to engage managers. We need to engage our boards with the simple fact that, this is not an HR thing. Preventing sexual harassment at work is not an HR thing. There are real risks and real costs to business here, and we need to get our senior boards and our senior managers really, really up to speed with what they mean. So again, really thinking about as well, when we're thinking about exiting people from the business, again, well, we know it's going to be X. Well, actually, we're not quite sure what it might be. Yes, we can give you an idea. Of course we can. Of course we can. But again, we need to think more clearly, I think, about risk assessing and getting that strategic support, that help, from your lawyers at the beginning of beginning of those discussions to really think about how we can exit someone, legally, but also, as cost effective as possible. So again, I think, front loading discussions. Oftentimes I see that we're asked kind of when things have gone wrong and, you've got a tribunal claim or you've got a grievance. Whereas actually, if we could have been involved and supported the business right at that sort of beginning stage and really kind of talked about, your different options, similar to Azil in terms of the recruitment process, actually, I think then we can have a much more constructive conversation and a much better outcome, or at least an outcome where actually we've all kind of got our eyes wide open to the risks and the potential costs. So just moving on, I also want to just flag this point. And as I said, this is a high level discussion. The purpose of this is not to give you any advice. Of course, we're available if you want to chat things through. But I just want to make this point. 6 months probation is different from 6 months service. Okay. The law doesn't care about labels. It's okay, Emma. I hear this a lot. It's okay, Emma, because we've got a 6-month probation period. Well, yeah, okay. But once somebody gets to 6 months service, it doesn't matter what you call them. And I think I can see lots of businesses getting themselves tied up because they'll be like, well, it's okay, they're on probation. Be honest, how many times have we let probation lapse? How many times have we extended probation? How many times have we just simply forgotten somebody's got 8 or 9 months service before we've gone, oh my goodness, we need to do something about this individual. So again, please, 6 months probation is not the same as 6 months service. We are really looking at here, and the law is concerned not with what you might call that individual, but what is their length of service, okay, and the effective date of termination. Similarly, oh, it's fine because we're going to make them work their notice. Yeah, but that's not the same. You have to look at when they actually physically left you, the effective date of termination. Again, language matters, clarity matters. I still see lots and lots of termination letters where literally I haven't got a clue when the employee is leaving. And I've been doing this for a long time. It's like be clearer in terms of your communication, because if there is any ambiguity, the employee will have that right to bring that claim against you, and the stakes are obviously going to be much higher. So we are going to have a look at probation periods, and I'm here to help should you want to. At this point again, not concerned with labels. It's okay because they're a fixed term employee. Now, the law is not saying we can't use fixed term employment contracts. We know we use them if we want to backfill, maybe it's a maternity cover, etc., etc. But what we have to remember again is that the ending of a fixed term contract is still a dismissal. So we still need to make sure that we've got that fair reason to dismiss, those statutory fair reasons to dismiss, and we follow a fair process. So yes, it's obvious it's a fixed term contract. We've got an end date. We're completely clear and upfront about this. But we've got to make sure that before that fixed term employee departs, and again, if they've got that 6 or more months service, as at obviously the 1st of January 2027, we're going to have to do more than just thank you very much. Here's a leaving card, see ya. So again, we're going to have to be much more smarter about the way that we manage those contracts, and we manage them before that end date as well. So we really need to focus on, I know there's a lot of businesses out there that use fixed term employment contracts, and maybe they just keep rolling and rolling and rolling them. Okay, so we just need to be very, very careful. And again, we're not, it's fine they're on probation, Emma. It's fine they're on a fixed term contract, Emma. It doesn't matter. Yeah, we're looking at, what is their length of service and when was the effective date of termination. So again, please, please, please take some advice on fixed term contracts. Again, doesn't mean we can't use them, but we've just got to be better, at the way in which we bring those contracts to an end. Please do not do this, okay? Do not leave it to the last week, okay? If we're getting to the 28th of December and we're saying, right, we need to, end someone's employment, we have to remember that there is a statutory minimum notice period, which is added on. Okay, so don't think you're trying to be smart by marching people out the door, because the law has already thought of that. We have it now, it's not anything different. We have the 1 year, 51-week rule now. It's just going to be the 5 month, and 3-week rule. So if you're going to leave it to the last minute, firstly, something has gone wrong with your internal auditing and your internal processes. Okay. And secondly, the levers that we will have to be able to help you and support you, are diminishing the closer and closer you get to getting that 6 months worth of service. So it's not, it's not a straight line 6 months. Okay, there are lots of wrinkles that we need to think about and consider. But my key message to you and to your managers is, be better organized, make decisions earlier, clearer, fairly, reasonably, more transparently. But please, please, please do not leave it to the last minute, because your options will be very, very much depleted. We've got some time, okay? We've got this window of opportunity, and I've got lots of clients who are currently, looking at individuals who maybe have less than 2 years, but also looking at individuals who maybe have more than 2 years, because we can benefit at the moment, from the compensation cap. So again, we've got time, but we do need to engage and we do need to focus, whether that's doing an ERA update to your boards, whether it's delivering a session on mastering probation, whether it's delivering a session on leading through legislative change to your managers, them really understanding that, they're going to have to up their game, when it comes to supporting their people and culture teams, their HR teams in terms of management and process. So again, here to help, get in touch, but again, think about it. That window, it is closing, and what we really don't want, as I've just said, is decisions being made at the last minute, because it's never ever a nice place to be, or it's going to become very legally risky and challenging as well. But of course, we've got other legal risks and challenges we need to think about. Discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment. I've already talked to you about the changes that are coming in October with regards to the raising of that liability bar when it comes to preventative duties for sexual harassment and obviously the new third party harassment, which is coming down the line, and victimization as well. An incredibly important claim that I think we often forget, when we're sort of focusing on discrimination and harassment, maybe. Automatic unfair dismissals, I've spoken about those. Again, that's not changing. Contractual claims, get the contract right. Your lawyers will be saying to you, what does their contract say? How long have they been with you for? Okay, so again, make sure we always go back to the contract. And again, holiday pay, unpaid wages, and then whistle blowing as well. So again, there's a myriad of claims and risks and issues that we need to be concerned with, as well as obviously the statutory right not to be unfairly dismissed. So again, lots of pieces of that legal jigsaw puzzle that we need to make sure that we get right. So please, please, please don't forget those either. So how are we going to avoid the unfair dismissal trap? So I've narrowed it down to 5 key things, but of course there are other things that I would love to be able to talk to you about, but obviously the time that we have together is precious and short. So your top 5 tips. Tip number 1 is let's go back to basics. Okay, let's really think about the recruitment process. Now, we can't stop people bringing claims. We know this. But actually, if we can move away from the panic recruiting that I see and I still see, and I still get phone calls from clients saying, Emma, we knew, we weren't sure, but, hey, we did, and now we're really not sure. So again, if we can just really think about and focus upon the recruitment process, again, it's really going to help us, I think, in terms of avoiding that, that difficult hire. So again, that focusing, I think, on recruitment. And Azil, just to bring you in as the recruitment expert, just some things that maybe you're seeing from your clients in terms of,
Yeah.
recruitment and issues there.
Yeah, and look, I think Emma's covered the kind of legal framework here brilliantly. But what I'd like to do is kind of zoom out and think about what this means from a kind of hiring and talent perspective. So we're kind of like, what we're already seeing is that organizations are becoming much less willing to take risks. The cost of a bad hire is increasing. The window to determine whether someone's successful is getting even shorter. And when we talk about strengthening recruitment and onboarding, I don't think the answer is simply adding another interview stage or making probation processes more onerous. The real question is like, should we be recruiting? We should think about our workforce planning, our succession planning, internal mobility, kind of skills audits, future capability needs, all of that kind of stuff needs to be figured out before we go to market. And like those simple questions of like, do we have someone internally who can step into this role? Is this a capability gap or is it simply a capacity issue? And what skills will we need in 24 months from now? Are we hiring for now or are we hiring for our future selves? So, there's kind of a lot that goes into it. We're not saying don't hire. Obviously, we are a recruitment firm who, hold our clients' hands through the whole processes. But I'm just saying that we can kind of think about it more holistically, and make more kind of considered decisions before jumping into live roles and going to market.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think from what I'm sensing from the clients that I'm talking to, again, cross sector, I think
Mm,
what they have realized actually is the benefit of a more strategic and partnered approach when it comes to recruitment rather than, oh my gosh, let's just go out, grab anybody, Sometimes it
Mm,
feels just off the street. Whereas actually, if we take a more considered approach and we really think about person specifications, job specifications, look, if we're saying we've got to think about maybe shortening our period of probation, and we want to kind of manage and address and really look at, skills versus, expectation. How are we going to judge somebody again without having a clear job description? So again, I think there's an opportunity here for your recruitment teams and your HR teams to bang the drum when it comes to, recruitment, and say, look, we need to be better, and we need you,
mm,
managers and business, to really kind of not go, well, it's your job, you do it. Actually, we've got to engage with this. And you also mentioned another really big opportunity. Now, look, our kind of, whole vibe with this is, look, it is difficult, and we appreciate that. We are all in it together. But actually, there are some real opportunities here for people teams, for HR teams and professionals,
mm.
and for employers more generally, in terms of what these changes mean. And I do think, and
Yeah.
again, I love the fact you said internal mobility, because often, we're not having, career conversations with our people. And actually, if, for example, we are not able to hire for whatever reason, actually, can we look internally and maybe, upskill the
Mm,
people who we currently have? Yeah, okay,
mm,
fine. They probably have been with us for
mm.
5 years. They've got employment rights. There's nothing we can do about that, but we know them and they know us, and there's a lot to be said. There's a lot to be said for that. So I do see this as an opportunity to actually, grow our own talent as well. And I do think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget, like, a probation period is a safety net for both parties. It shouldn't be like your entire recruitment strategy. It's like, okay, let's just get them in and we've got 6 months to figure it out. We've got to, we support clients through this all the time. Like, is your process rigorous? Have you sorted out the kind of finer details around this? Um, you know, like, have you defined the role? Is your job description, kind of robust? Have you kind of, thought through where your pain points are and what this person will be solving? I think going back to something that you said earlier, it's like, we want our new hires to succeed. We want new people to have the right onboarding, the right kind of guidance, and also before they join the organization, have a clear picture on like what's really going on. Don't just paint a rosy picture of what's going on in your organization just to try and get someone through the door. I see this happen a lot. And my advice is always the same. Like, and this is my advice actually for every single thing in my life. Honesty always wins. It just does. Be clear, be transparent. Some candidates don't want a finished piece. They want to have their say. They want to be able to impact things. It doesn't need to be all clean and tidy. Ambiguity is okay. Operating in the grey is okay. Just be honest about it. So you don't have someone walk in the door and then call their recruiter and say, I think I've made a terrible mistake in week one.
Absolutely. And I think, if you are listening to this and you think, oh, our probation period is 6 months, I do think that you need to think about that. And I do think, I've got lots of clients who are reducing that period. And again, I'm happy to work with you on that. But also, this shouldn't be seen as a revolving door. This shouldn't be seen as, right, we're going to get to 4 months, we're going to make a decision, see ya. We shouldn't see probation like that. We want people to come thrive, da, 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 because again, it goes to reputation, doesn't it, of the employer. So again, we could use all this really great stuff that we're doing in terms of support and one-to-ones, and does the employee know what they're doing? Do they need more support, training, mentoring, all of this great stuff? Don't stop at month 4. Keep it going, because again, if things might, dip at month 7 or 8, we've got this fantastic evidence and process to be able to show, look, there were a few niggles, at the start, but actually, and we tried to help you, they've kind of come to the service again. So we've got kind of a continuous picture. So I don't want this to be
Yeah.
seen as, right, 4 months, that's it, off. And I
Yeah.
think that's it. I think that's as a really important, message as
Yeah.
well, that you don't feel pressured. If
Mm.
people do, well, fine. We just have to be, fair reason, fair process, open and transparent. And in some
Yeah.
cases, we may need to. If somebody's got, we need to make reasonable adjustments, we may need
Mm.
to do that. So, I think it's
Yeah.
thinking, much, but, clear targets, a structured process. This is stuff we should be
Mm.
doing anyway. It just means that there's going to be a
Yeah.
greater spotlight on what we're doing. So absolutely
Yes,
review recruitment.
exactly. Exactly. And like from a talent perspective, the biggest takeaway from all this is that the best way to avoid an unfair dismissal issue isn't having a better exit process. It's making better people decisions much, much earlier through workforce planning, recruitment, onboarding, and that big topic of leadership capability.
Well, absolutely. And you'll see I put it in red in my second point, which is around kind of, manager training.
Mm,
It does it is very surprising when you do when I run lots and lots of sessions for managers on leadership, behaviors, legal compliance, being, employment lawyer and everything. But it does really surprise you when people go, oh, right, yes, manager, yes, managing people, right. Okay. And it comes as a bit of a surprise to them when I say, the clue is in the job title. But it still
yeah.
it still sort of staggers me. So yeah, making sure that we've got managers who
Mm,
understand that they do need to manage and lead their teams and be
yeah.
all things. And I get that. It's really
Yeah.
difficult. It's really hard to be a manager at the moment. We're expected
It
to know
is.
everything about everything
Yeah.
as well as do
We're,
our job. So, there are
and
lots in
document
place.
document
Exactly,
everything,
exactly. There are
you
not
know.
enough hours. So again, we've got
Yeah.
lots of plates spinning. But again,
Mm,
managing performance, you are only as good as the people that you lead.
mm,
And that's so true. You've got to make sure that you've got people who understand what they're doing. You can't, as a manager, do everything. Okay, it just doesn't work. Something has to give, normally you. So,
yeah.
again, managing, manager training on all of this is really, really important, as well as making sure you've got clear processes, clear guidance, communicated, disseminated down. And decision
Mm,
making, as again, Azil, you touched on that, evidence. We
mm.
can't go into bat with you as lawyers unless we've got some documents to show that you've actually done the thing that you said that you've done.
Absolutely.
And
And it's
again,
just as much for the employee's benefit as it is for the manager.
yeah,
Documenting conversations, it's not this dirty topic where you're trying to catch people out. You're basically
absolutely.
like, you're giving something for the employee to refer back to as well, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's the least we can do as people leaders.
Exactly. This
Um,
isn't about managing performance. Manage the
mm,
good. Yeah,
mm,
celebrate the good.
celebrate
I
it.
think we need
Yeah.
to rebrand performance management because I think it's just about managing, when things don't go so wrong. Actually, we
Mm,
should be managing the stuff that goes right as well.
mm,
And you're absolutely right. Evidence is key. What have you done? Because, also when you think about if people are going to have longer with which to bring an employment tribunal claim, we've then got early conciliation with ACAS. You may not, know that somebody's brought a claim for maybe a year.
yeah.
We've got cases that are being listed in 2029. I've heard some tribunals 2030 for incidents that happened maybe what, year, 2 years ago. I mean, there's going to be such a delay in terms of thing happening, and I'm going to have to go to tribunal to talk about it. So again,
Yeah.
evidence will really help to jog your mind. And also, if we've brought the employee with us, right, on this
Mm,
journey, on this process, it might just be that they're less likely to challenge us because they get it, because they
mm,
understand. Most employment
mm,
issues are around communication. You've said
yeah.
A and the employee has heard Z. So again, if we can bring people with us, that's often
Yeah.
a good start. And again, early assessment, early assessment of
So,
performance, early assessment of, the impact the employee
mm,
is making. And again, early reviews of performance, keep that under review as well. Auditing your staff. How long have people been with you for? Is there an opportunity to maybe manage things now rather than letting things creep into next year when it's going to get much harder? So again, this isn't about, knee-jerk reactions or rushing or anything like that. We still have to be fair and reasonable. And those employees that already have the statutory right not to be unfairly
Mm.
dismissed. But, if we've got individuals that maybe have less than 6 months service or will have, or individuals who we might be able to benefit from the compensation cap, again, is there an opportunity to really engage with those discussions now and really think about
Yeah,
litigation risk and also potential compensation?
yeah.
And,
So
and
how can we,
lastly,
yeah,
yeah, and
sorry,
so
go
and
on.
so lastly, it's always the tip, isn't it? Whichever topic we're talking about. Policies, review those, lots of changes that we'll need to make more generally. Train to them as well. That's really important. Disseminate, review your contracts. I've already mentioned that it's potentially going to become harder to change contracts of employment when we think about the changes that are coming in with regards to fire and rehire. So again, review your contracts, notice periods. Have you got the full tools that are available to you? And that's really important as well, making sure you've got all the options available to you, particularly in the probation period, because we tend to sort of have a sort of woolly probation clause, and
Yeah.
then all the real nuts and bolts are in the main clause around termination, and they don't actually apply to probation. So we just need to make sure that we do that. And also review your use of fixed term contracts, not to necessarily stop using them, but again, to use them in a way that we understand how to use them more effectively to avoid, at the end of that fixed term, any suggestion that we've dismissed that employee and we've dismissed them unfairly.
So
Azil, how can you help?
how can we help? So one of the things we're discussing with clients almost daily now is how these changes affect their talent strategy, not just employment law. So, we've got market intelligence. So we help organizations understand what good looks like externally. What are your competitors paying? What HR structures are they using? What benefits are they? There's some really competitive benefits out. What are your competitors doing? How are they approaching probation, performance, and people capability? So many of our conversations now start earlier than the here's a role, help us fill it. We're helping our clients think about org design, team structures, succession planning, internal mobility. That's the benefit of partnering with a global firm. Skills mapping, future workforce requirements. And it's like, that thing I said earlier about are you hiring for the next 12 months, or are you hiring for your kind of future selves? There's so much change, not just legislatively, but technologically, which we all know about. So we need to think about, and that goes back to the audit point as well. Are you auditing, not just auditing for like misconduct, but you auditing for the skills? Where are the gaps? How can we achieve our strategic objectives? So we increasingly act as a strategic talent advisor, and we're no longer just a kind of recruitment firm. I think that concept is quite outdated. So when clients need HR, people, talent, leadership capability, we're able to benchmark talent against the market and identify individuals who've successfully navigated periods of change for competitors in the past. So every hire is an investment, and it can also be a risk. So our where we come in is helping to reduce that risk through better briefing, stronger assessment, market mapping. We never rely on ad response, for example, to find talent for you. Benchmarking and objective input into interview processes as well. So employment law is changing, but good people practices remain consistent. So organizations that thrive aren't the ones that, no shade, Emma, have the best lawyers or the most detailed policies, but they're the orgs that have thought through their hiring decisions, invest in onboarding, develop managers effectively, address issues early rather than late. And if this legislation encourages us to do that more, count me in.
I absolutely agree with you, Azil, and I think it's similar to anyone can tell you the law. You can look it up. AI law is not necessarily law, but And I think that's the difference. And you know what you're saying. I mean, now I would say, we are risk, we risk assess. We're trusted business advisors. We're the people who people pick up the phone to and go, Emma, I'm thinking about this. And that's a relationship I think that will really help businesses navigate these changes and navigate the risk. So absolutely on board with what you're saying here. Look, we can help strategic support, litigation support, whether it's, training, whether it's upskilling your managers, whether it's looking at workforce planning as well. So again, looking at where maybe we've got some gaps, maybe we need to do some work around kind of, maybe managing different teams and maybe looking at headcounts reductions as well, and also buying businesses. People, businesses are very active as well out there, insourcing, outsourcing, and buying different bits. And also, how we want to sort of remodel your entire business. If you're looking to, maybe sell, maybe think about doing an employee ownership trust as well. We can help with that, as well as, obviously all the contracts and the EDI work as well. So again, if we can help, then please do get in touch. And again, here are our contact details, but we'll be sending something out after this with details of how you can get in touch.
Yeah.
So we've had a couple of questions. Actually, I'm going to take the one. I'm going to just deal with this one that we've had in about
Mm,
redundancy. So as we know, statutory redundancy pay is applicable once an employee reaches 2 years service. And the question is that going to be impacted by the change in the qualifying period for unfair dismissal? No, it's not. So yes, the right to bring a claim for unfair dismissal, ordinary unfair dismissal, is changing from 2 years to 6 months, but the qualifying period of service for statutory redundancy pay is going to remain at 2 years.
mm.
So that's the point there.
Um, we've had another question through. So, will this legislation make companies more risk averse in hiring? Okay, so I'll take this one. So, look, possibly, yes. But I think a better outcome is that we become more deliberate rather than more cautious. So the answer isn't like hiring less. It's being clearer on what the role looks like, what success looks like, assessing it properly, and really supporting people when they join. And for me, that is important. Um, okay, so I think we've run slightly over. It's not hopefully not the end of the world. I can see almost everyone is still um on the call. If you want to pick up the conversation and have a deeper conversation around the kind of hiring side, please reach out to me. If you would like to have a conversation with Emma, look, Emma, you do some fantastic workplace training. You are a hero. You supported so many of my clients. I've got receipts and all the rest of it that are testament to how wonderfully you train people. If you want to explore that with Emma, please feel free to reach out to her. She's very available. Well, very busy, but she'll make herself available.
Thank you so much. And hopefully that hasn't, hopefully that's given you some practical guidance and some tips and things you can take away. So hopefully you won't be too much head in your hands and hoping it will all go away. Bit more to go. It's a marathon. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone, today, and hope you have a lovely day ahead.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.